how to do something big. Everybody wants to do something big in their life, you know, be a millionaire, entrepreneur, whatever it might be. And I was, pretty nice night. Look at that outside. Pretty crazy looking. That's not pollution, I don't think, from LA. Just looks cool. I was just reading this book. This is, some people consider it the best business book you can ever read. That's what Wall Street Journal calls it. It's called Getting More. It's by this Wharton professor. He teaches a class at Wharton Business School. That's the most sold out class in history of the university. And he has this one little chapter. He goes, you know, why did he call this wanting more? He says, that's one of the instinctive human desires, isn't it? More. Whenever you do, whatever you do, don't you wonder if there's more? Doesn't have to mean more for you and less for someone else. It just has to be more. And it doesn't necessarily mean more money. It means more of whatever you value. More money, more time, more food, more love, more travel, more responsibility, more basketball, more TV, more music. And I just was thinking about, I mean, what I'm talking about now isn't necessarily about this book, but that's it. It's like there's something intrinsically built into us, this instinct. And I'm sure you've had it. I'm sure you've had a cool idea before and you saw someone else actually do it. That's one of the most painful things that can ever happen to you in life, that missed opportunity where you see, it's like Netflix. I have to wonder how many people thought of the idea of just shipping DVDs in the mail instead of having stores like Blockbuster. Blockbuster ended up bankrupt, and Reed Hastings started Netflix, and now is, you know, built one of the coolest companies in the world. I was just watching a documentary on my phone on Netflix. 30%, at peak hours, 30% of the entire internet in the United States is running through Netflix. And so he took an idea and got more and more and more in a good way, in a way that benefits society, created something, a cool idea and innovation. And so, you know, today I thought I would talk about this subject for a second, whether it's you being a millionaire entrepreneur or you wanting more just quality of life. Like, what does it take to do big things? And so I think the first thing, I've talked about this before, it's like start with the principle of inversion. And Warren Buffett, the second richest man in the world, was speaking at a college. I saw this on a YouTube video, and he brought this up. He was saying, let's say you're trying to figure out how to do more, do something bigger, something cooler, something better for society, better for your bank account. He says, imagine you could bet, imagine you're back in high school. You can bet on any student there, and whoever you bet on, you'll get 10% as a bonus of their income each year. So if they make 50 grand, you'll get 5 grand a year. If they make $1 million, you'll get 100 grand a year, okay? He said, who would you bet on? Would you bet on the quarterback of the football team? Would you bet on the best looking person, the most popular person? He said, no. You would probably look for a set of intangibles. And then he said to take this exercise one step further, and of course Warren Buffett used this to become more than a millionaire investor. He used it to become a billionaire investor. He said, who would you bet against? And that's the principle of inversion. Flip it around. To know how to do something big, what guarantees that you will never do anything big? And Charlie Munger, who's the business partner of Warren Buffett, was asked that question. And he said 2 things: sloth and unreliability. He said, guarantee you want to guarantee yourself you will never do anything big with your life. Be lazy and be unreliable. Somebody who sometimes does stuff and then flakes. He's like, those are, in his experience, those guys' experience. So I think the first thing is always invert. Like, think about, what would I bet against turning into something big? And then make sure you never do those things. That's such, it's like a reversal of the golden rule. It's such a good concept that when I tell people it, they forget it. That's how most people are in the world. It's like people want some super complex mathematical E equals MC squared. I'm like, no, that's pretty good right there. Then number 2 goes along with this. be whoever you would bet on. So you know who I would bet on? Going back to high school or junior high or whatever. I didn't go to college. I dropped out of college. But who would I bet on becoming a millionaire entrepreneur and somebody who's going to do big things? Easy. I would bet on somebody who had what I call deep domain expertise and clarity. So let me explain what I mean. So like, let's say you're older and you bump into somebody from junior high or high school. And you remember that kid from junior high and high school. And that was the kid who now, let's say they're trying to start a restaurant chain. So they come to you and they say, hey, I'm raising investment. Do you want to invest in me? Now, if I think back, and I was like, I knew that kid when he was 12 years old. And you know what he would do when all of us would, in the summer, go to camp and play basketball? He'd go work at his dad's restaurant. Or he was the one always, you know, in the kitchen at school working with the cafeteria people or whatever. And I was like, that kid always was focused on one simple thing. And he had always was like, knew a lot about food. That's who I'd bet on. I wouldn't care what he looked like. I wouldn't care male, female, black, white. I'd be like, give me the kid who had clarity on what they were doing young and pretty much, you know, just deep domain expertise. Learned about making sushi, learned about, you know, sourcing food, learned how to work on industrial stoves. The younger, the better. Now, if you're watching this and you're not that young anymore, the principle still applies. I'm not going to be delusional here. It still applies. But obviously, if you didn't start at 12, good news is most people, we live in a society where the educational system tells us that you got to wait for some reason until you're in your 20s to do big things, which, by the way, is a big myth. But if you're 50 and you're watching this, it's the same thing. You then reverse it again, another set of inversion, and you go, okay, I'd bet on somebody who had clarity and deep domain expertise, so then you become that person. You can't do big things without some level of clarity and deep domain expertise. Like Steven Spielberg was making movies at 7, he says. I went to a little thing with him, got to meet him. You know, the king of Hollywood, 7 years old, you would have found him at his home, pretty much high sense of clarity, like I want to do this, and not just clarity, but deep domain expertise. He was playing with different lenses. So you have to be that person, because I sure as hell would bet on Steven Spielberg, and that would be a good bet. Now, again, you can start on that at any age. The younger, the better. So the third thing here to do big things, I'll read you something. If you don't, where's my phone here? Let's put this on my Twitter and my Snapchat. If you don't follow, it's under Tai Lopez 1. And this is what Arthur Schopenhauer. So Arthur Schopenhauer is one of the greatest philosophers of all time. And I posted this, a day or two ago. He said, everyone takes the limits of their own vision for the limits of the world. Okay? So what you have to do is, I would question my self-imposed limits. So let's talk about this, because this can sound very cliche, but Schopenhauer was not a cliche philosopher. He was a complicated man. And you know, this book that if you've seen some of my other YouTube videos and podcast stuff, Hatching Twitter, this is a story of Twitter by Nick Bilton. So Nick Bilton was in here the other day. He's kind of the guy that knows more about the real story of Twitter than anybody. Wrote a New York Times best-selling book on Twitter, and he says, you know, I asked him point blank, I was like, Jack Dorsey, Ed Williams, these guys that built an $18 billion company from scratch, how'd they do it? What was the thing you learned from being around them? And he said, what I learned is these guys had very broad vision. He's like, they were hungry. Like, they weren't the guys going, Jack Ma is another person like this. Jack Ma started, I think he's the richest man in China now. He was making 80 cents a day, a dime an hour. And now, you know, he's worth whatever, 10, 20 billion dollars. And the thing, Alipay, he owns these different, Alibaba. And when I think it was eBay or no, it was Yahoo came to China and they wanted to buy Jack Ma's company, he had such broad vision where most people would have taken the deal. He said he thought bigger. He said, no, I'm going to buy you. That's what he did. He bought, and he owns Yahoo China. So Jack Dorsey, same thing. These guys at Twitter, they thought big. And so what happens, and there's various reasons. There's good science. Can you grab me that book right there, that sociology red book? What happens if you're not careful? Yeah, that one, this one. So this is a book I keep around. It's a very famous technical book. It's by Dan Gilbert and Fisk. It's Handbook of Social Psychology. This is volume 2. I don't know where this is volume 1. Oh, I have volume 2 here. So it's this complicated book on, convergences and using the self to understand reflected self-appraisals. And one of the concepts that's in these type of books is something called social controls. So in some places, like in Sweden and Norway, they have this phrase called jantelogen. I lived there for a little while, and jantelogen is basically never think too highly of yourself. If you try to stand out, they'll push you back down. That's what jantelogen somewhat means. There's a similar saying in Japan, the nail that stands out gets pounded down again. And so as you've grown up, you and I, this world view in terms of limitations has been very, social controls have come in for various reasons. Now, social controls sometimes are good. They're good for society as a whole, but they're usually bad for individuals, a lot of them. And so if you're not careful, without you and I even realizing it, there's been tremendous levels of brainwashing. I'll just give you some examples. Let's take age, right? What is the self-imposed limits that people have on when you can start doing things? Well, a lot of people think, in your teens, you kind of just learn about life and go to school, and in your 20s, you kind of bounce around, and then in your 30s, you kind of settle down, and then in your 40s, you really focus. Well, that's a self-imposed limitation. Now you have a kid who started Sumley in London, and by 15, he sold it for $30 million. There's a kid, I forget his name, he started a toy company. He's, again, 14 or 15 years old. He's making 10 million, the company's doing 10 million a year. So it used to be 50, 100, 150 years ago, young people couldn't do stuff. There was social controls in effect, but those have gone away with the rise of the digital age and internet. There's other things, if you're old, you have self-imposed limitations. The truth is of the matter, without being cliche, is there are limitations that you and I have. They're just usually not the ones we think. Let me say that again. There's limits to whether you can become a millionaire entrepreneur. Not everybody watching this can, but many, many more of you can than you give yourself credit for. And the reason, Dr. Helen Fisher, she says, as you grow up, by the time you're about 14 to 16, you create this mental map, which pretty much puts the boundaries of how you see life. Oprah Winfrey says when she first made, I think she said she got signed as a news anchor or something for $3,000 or $4,000 a month. And she remembers telling her dad and her both agreed, this is the most money they ever dreamed that they could make in their life. $3,000 to $4,000. That's what Oprah's self-imposed limitation was. But you know what? There was people out there that if they made $3,000 or $4,000 an hour were depressed. Oprah was happy. And now, of course, Oprah made the switch. She popped out of that bubble. So these are simple. This is a mental tool. This is a practical tool. And this is another mental tool. Now, there's specific tools, like I talked about, deep domain expertise. I'm trying to keep these talks like the length of my TEDx talk, which is around 18 minutes. So I'm not going to go too long on here. But think long and hard. Now, there's about 7 other things. I would say there's 10, like the 10 commandments to doing big things. That's how I teach it when I'm training people that run companies that I start or invest in. So these are 3 that I start with in this exact order. You begin with the inversion process. Then you switch over related to this. You figure out the attributes you will bet on if you had $1 million to invest or if you got 10% of income, and then you become those. Very simple. It's kind of like the golden rule of business and big things. Then you have to do this one. If you don't do this one, the next 7 ones, which are very practical, kind of step by step of like, okay, you have an idea? Do you get a lawyer to patent it, trademark it? Do you buy a domain name? Or if you're a little more advanced, do you begin to build sales funnels? Do you do a lean startup approach? Do you do what I call, quick iterations, which is kind of a variation of lean startup? Do you start out with focused on virality? Do you focus on paid advertising? Do you raise money? I just had Neil Patel in here, one of the most famous entrepreneurs, of our time, young guy making crazy money, started all these big companies, and we were talking about this formula that works really well, and he's been able to use it over and over. And we compared notes. It's the same one as I've got in this 10-step program, this 10-step of the millionaire entrepreneur doing big things. Remember, you don't have to just be focused on millionaires. You can be focused. You can use this to change the world if you're into philanthropy, humanitarian stuff. You can use this, fitness stuff. It works in every area. But I'm going to talk specifically. So I'm going to kind of wrap up here, but I'm going to leave you a link below. And I decided I'm going to do a free online talk. I've been doing these, people really benefiting from these free talks. So if you click the link below, you'll see the time. Our code will translate it to your local time, wherever you are in the world, and you can register to listen in for free. It's completely free. There's no tricks or anything. You don't have to put a credit card number or anything. So you just click the link, it'll pop up, and it'll give you the time, and you can and the reason we register people is I've been having a ton of people come on them when I make them free, like some of the stuff that I charge for, so that when I do things free, people are like, oh my God, I want this stuff free. So make sure you don't procrastinate. Click the link, because we're capping how many people that we let on at a time and can comment. It's going to be a live talk, so you can interact and chat and stuff and ask your questions. So remember, now one quick thing, when I was talking about, because the next one, it starts to go through the practical execution things. One cool thing, I was just talking to Neil Patel, is like, you don't need $1 million. Like one of his businesses he started, it took $1 million to get it off the ground. Like I'm going to show you how you can do stuff even now when I can put $1 million into a business if I want to launch something. I still have found in this 10-step formula, the next 7 steps, if you follow them, you can launch extremely lean and still build $1 million companies, or beyond $10 million companies, or beyond that too. So that's the awesome thing. And so you've got to understand, some of these things have changed. Like even 5 years ago, the landscape of the world is very different, I found. With the rise of social marketing, which is just, I did a Periscope. I don't know if you guys were on earlier today. I did a Periscope talk, and I had like 2,800 people just pop in on their phone. Like when else you couldn't even have done that 1 year ago. Periscope just launched this year. So I'm going to go into some practical cutting edge things along with some old school stuff. You need old school meets new school. That's like my motto. Some people are all new school. They're like, oh, it's only about Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Google AdWords. And I'm like, yeah, but old Rockefeller tricks work too. Rockefeller was 1800s. He made so much money in today's dollars. He had $600 billion, almost over half $1 trillion. So I'm going to show you in these 10 tools, when you click the link and you register, when you pop in there and listen you can listen on your phone, you can listen on your computer, you can listen at work, you can listen in the car, you can watch it, or you can just listen. It'll work both ways. So when you come back and listen in, I'm going to be showing you how to merge old school and new school. I've learned, Alan Nation, my mentor, told me, don't be the first or the last to try a new idea. That's the exact happy median of this new school meets old school. You don't want to be only building your business, only building your idea around the Meerkat or Periscope, these brand new iPhone apps or Android apps. But you also don't want to be only old school and building some steel monopoly like Carnegie and Rockefeller and JP Morgan were doing 150 years ago. Like, it won't completely work. So it's in the hybridization of concepts and ideas. That's why I read a book a day, because then I can morph ideas and it's so much more powerful. They call that in biology hybrid vigor. When you take two purebred animals and you breed them together, you get a much more powerful, it's called an F1 cross, if you remember back from biology. So it's the same with ideas. You take old school idea, new school, and then boom, and you build something that you no longer will be somebody who just imagines. Most people are wanderers. They just wander through life. They're wandering and wondering. And it's the worst way. Wonder, what if I had tried my idea? What if I had executed on? Like, what if? You don't want to be a what if person. Do it. And you're going to learn in this talk how you can do it, and with just an absolute minimalization of risk, mistakes, wasted money, wasted time. If people knew how you can merge old and new school things into big ideas now, like, there will be an onslaught of people doing it. But people are weak, unfortunately, in the modern world. All of us have become weak. We've got, modern appliances and air conditioning, and I'm guilty of it, you're guilty of it. We're all guilty of becoming weak-willed. So don't be weak-willed. Invest in your own brain. Learn these 10 things. They're free. That's the crazy thing about the world. You can give people stuff free, and they still won't use it. I know when I was seeking out mentors, I traveled all around the world. I paid money to learn this stuff. But that was when I was more old school, coming off a farm, so I was used to hard work. So don't be afraid to listen in. You can do it wherever you are in the world. So click the link. I can't remember if it's above or below, wherever it is on the page. It'll take you to register page. You see the exact time. Register for the time that you can listen in. That's convenient for you. And we'll be going over these 10 things. Bring pad and paper. All right? That's the only thing I ask of you. Pad and paper, and don't be ADD when you get there. So don't be, texting and doing 30 things. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger says when he lifts weights, he says, because he still lifts weights. I got to hang out with him a couple months ago, and he lifts weights here at Venice at the beach. And he says, man, I see people lifting weights and texting at the same time. He goes, they're never going to have muscles. He's old school. He's like, if you lift weights, then go outside and do a little texting. Text your girlfriend or your boyfriend later. Focus. So that's the only thing. When you click this link and you show up, bring a little pad of paper, old school. Don't only take notes on your phone. I'm all about high-tech stuff, but I drove a Bugatti this weekend. Test drove it with the CEO Bugatti. So that's a new school car. It's also very old school, by the way. But I will talk to you. Bring your questions if you have some. Think on these 3 so you're prepared for the next 7 that I'm about to give you. So click the link, and I will see you not too long from now. All right? Talk to you soon.